High in the alpine hush of Whispering Pines, Colorado, Officer Rachel Moreno sipped her coffee inside the creaky old mountain precinct, half asleep and halfway through the graveyard shift. The town was small, the kind that rarely made headlines. A few calls here and there about wandering elk or snow-blocked roads, nothing more. That morning, frost clung stubbornly to windows, and pine needles shimmered silver beneath the pale light of dawn. Everything felt still, too still. Then came the knock, sharp, deliberate, and completely out of place. Rachel glanced up, expecting a local needing help or shelter. But when she opened the door, her breath caught. Standing there, framed by mist and snow, was a massive brown bear. Its fur glistened with frost, steam rising from its body. But it wasn't growling, it wasn't retreating, it was knocking. Again, 3 heavy, intentional thumps of its paw against the wooden frame. Behind her, Officer Dean Keller reached instinctively for his sidearm. "That's not normal," he muttered. But Rachel didn't move. She locked eyes with the bear, sensing something strange, something intelligent. It turned its head, looking toward the forest, then back at her, waiting. It wanted her to follow. Logic screamed no. Her instincts whispered go. Against every rule in the book, Rachel stepped onto the porch. The bear turned and walked into the trees, slow, deliberate. Not hunting, not fleeing, leading. Rachel's heart pounded as the forest swallowed them both. Whatever this bear was about to show her, it would change everything. The cold bit at Rachel's skin as she stepped off the porch, boots crunching against the frost-bitten ground. The bear, silent, broad-shouldered and imposing, walked with eerie calm ahead of her, pausing at the edge of the woods to glance back. Not a threat, not a chase, an invitation. Dean's voice crackled behind her. "Rachel, get back here. This is insane." But she couldn't turn away. Not now. Something about the bear's eyes, ancient, knowing, had ignited a gut-deep instinct she couldn't ignore. The creature turned again and disappeared into the trees. Rachel followed. Branches brushed her coat, and fog hung like breath from the forest itself. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became. No birds, no wind, only the sound of her breathing and the bear's slow, deliberate footsteps. Then the bear stopped, its head lifted, its body tense. Rachel froze. A low, sorrowful groan rumbled from the bear's chest, and it stepped aside. That's when she saw it. Scattered belongings in the snow, a torn backpack, a bloodied scarf caught on a bush, a trail of disturbed snow leading downhill. Her heart slammed into her ribs. Someone had been here, recently. She looked at the bear. It stared back, not with the wild hunger of a predator, but with something else entirely. Urgency. This wasn't random. This was a plea. Rachel gripped her radio. "Dean, I think we've got a missing person." And the bear, it knew. Whatever this was, it was no ordinary search. It was a rescue mission. And the bear was leading the way. Rachel pressed deeper into the forest, the towering pines closing in around her like ancient sentinels. The bear moved ahead with deliberate strides, no fear, no hesitation. It wasn't trying to escape her presence, it was guiding her. The terrain grew rougher, and the temperature dropped. Still, Rachel pressed on, adrenaline keeping her warm. Suddenly, the bear stopped. It sniffed the air, then let out a low groan, almost mournful, and turned to face her. Rachel stepped forward, heart pounding. Then she saw it. A boot, half buried beneath a fallen branch, the leather torn, laces frozen solid. Her breath caught as she spotted more. An arm, limp in the snow, barely visible through the tangled brush. "Oh God," she whispered, already reaching for her radio. "Dean, I found someone. Unconscious. Male. Looks like he's been here a while. I need EMTs now. She scrambled down the short slope, careful not to slip. The man's face was pale, lips blue, his skin dusted with frost. But when she placed her fingers on his neck, faint but steady. A pulse. "Hey, can you hear me?" she asked, pulling off her glove to warm his cheek. His eyelids fluttered. Behind her, the bear loomed silently on the ridge, unmoving, watching, protecting. Dean's voice came through the radio, breathless. "You serious? The bear led you there?" Rachel didn't answer. She looked up at the massive creature, meeting its eyes. This wasn't luck. This was loyalty, purpose. She whispered, "You're not just a bear, you're a guardian." And the bear turned, fading into the trees once more. Sirens broke the mountain silence 20 minutes later as rescue crews converged on the clearing. Rachel guided them in, adrenaline masking the cold that had finally begun to seep into her bones. Paramedics rushed to the injured man, still unconscious but alive, and began stabilizing him for transport. Dean arrived seconds behind them, his breath clouding in the frigid air, eyes darting between Rachel, the wounded stranger, and the tree line beyond. "Tell me this isn't real," he muttered. "You actually followed a bear into the woods. And it worked?" Rachel didn't respond. Her gaze drifted back to the ridge where the bear had stood, but it was empty now. Bruno, as the man would later name him, had vanished like a ghost. Yet the memory of those eyes, full of knowing, lingered. Later, at the hospital, the man, Adam Carter, finally awoke. He spoke with a cracked voice, words raspy from dehydration. "I thought I was done for, until he showed up." His hand trembled as he reached for water. "The bear. He kept me warm, stayed with me, left, then came back with you." Rachel's pulse skipped. "You knew him?" I think he remembered me," Adam said, his eyes distant. "Years ago, I rescued a cub from a poacher's trap in these woods. I never thought I'd see him again." Rachel sat back, breath catching in her throat. This was more than survival. It was a circle closing, a life saved, returned. And as dusk fell over Whispering Pines, she realized this story had only just begun. The helicopter's blades beat against the sky, stirring snow into a frenzied swirl as the rescue team lifted the hiker out of the ravine. Rachel stood just beyond the tree line, coat flapping in the wind, her eyes never leaving the bear, still watching from a nearby ridge like a silent sentinel. Dean approached from behind, his voice low, hesitant. "You gonna tell them what really happened out here?" Rachel didn't answer right away. She stared at the ridge, at the place where ancient eyes met hers across the forest veil. "No," she finally said, "not all of it." Back at the precinct, whispers flew. The official report spoke of luck, sharp instincts, a well-timed hunch. But the truth remained tucked between the lines, a bear that knocked on the door and refused to leave until help arrived. A bear that guided a human through danger to save another. That night, Rachel returned to the forest. The moon hung low and silver, casting soft light on the path she now knew by heart. She carried nothing but a pack of food and a quiet promise. At the ridge, she stopped. "Thank you," she whispered to the shadows. From the darkness came a deep, familiar huff. Rachel smiled, setting the pack down before retreating. Some bonds defy understanding, some guardians walk on four legs, and somewhere in the snowy vastness beyond Whispering Pines, a bear named Bruno stood watch, not out of instinct, but out of love. And Rachel knew he would return again. The next morning, frost still clinging to every branch and rooftop in Whispering Pines, the town awoke to whispers. rumors of the bear, the rescue, the miracle. But for Officer Rachel Moreno, the story wasn't over. She couldn't stop thinking about the way the bear, Bruno, had watched over the injured man. It wasn't instinct, it was intention. That day, while the rest of the town debated tranquilizers and relocation orders, Rachel returned to the forest alone. No gun, no backup, just a thermal jacket, a ration pack, and a promise. She hiked back to the ravine, where the snow bore faint impressions of the day before. Blood, boot prints, and something larger. She followed them deeper than before, to a grove untouched by wind, still, silent. And there, like a ghost reborn from memory, Bruno emerged from the trees. Rachel's breath hitched. He didn't charge, didn't growl, just stood, eyes fixed on her, his massive body still as stone. She stepped forward slowly and knelt, pulling the ration pack from her coat. "For you," she whispered, placing it gently on the snow. Bruno sniffed the air but didn't approach. His eyes locked with hers, and in that silent moment, something ancient passed between them. Recognition. Trust. Then, without a sound, he turned and vanished into the white mist. Rachel didn't call out. She didn't follow. She just whispered into the wind, "I'll protect you too." Because in a world quick to fear what it doesn't understand, someone had to defend the guardian in the woods. By the next morning, whispers had turned to headlines. Miracle Bear saves man in mountains. News vans lined the streets of Whispering Pines, antennas reaching skyward like metal weeds. The town's quiet charm had shattered under the weight of national attention. Rachel stood outside the precinct, jaw tight, as reporters clamored for a statement. But inside, she felt only dread. Because with attention came scrutiny, and with scrutiny came fear. That fear arrived in the form of government SUVs and cold-eyed officials in crisp uniforms. Wildlife authorities. They spoke in clipped tones about unpredictable behavior, public safety, and necessary relocation. But Rachel knew what they really meant. They wanted Bruno gone. That night, snow fell hard and fast, burying the town in silence. Rachel met Dean at the trailhead, both clad in thermal gear and weighted by the same mission: find Bruno before they did. As they entered the woods, wind howled through the pines. Branches creaked. Every sound felt magnified. And then, movement. A flicker of brown fur through the trees. Rachel raised a hand. "Bruno?" she whispered. He emerged slowly, steam rising from his back like smoke from a myth. His eyes met hers, calm, aware. He knew. Somehow he knew. Rachel's heart cracked. "They're coming for you," she said softly. "You have to go, now." The bear blinked once. Then, as if understanding the weight of his presence, he turned and slipped into the darkness. The forest closed behind him, silent once more. But Rachel knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of legend. In a world quick to fear what it doesn't understand, this story reminds us of the quiet power of trust, loyalty, and unseen bonds. Bruno, a bear once saved by a human, became the rescuer, proving that compassion transcends species, language, even instinct. He didn't act out of instinct or hunger, but out of memory, out of love. And Officer Rachel? She listened. When logic said no, she followed her heart, and it saved a life. Sometimes, the greatest acts of courage come not from force, but from empathy. In Bruno's story, we find a truth the world needs now more than ever. Kindness leaves an echo. It can ripple through the wildest places and return to us when we least expect it. So if this story touched your heart, made you pause, or opened your eyes to the beauty of the unexpected, Don't forget to like this video, share it, and help keep Bruno's legacy alive.